All right, and we're live. Welcome everyone to this week's. I guess we skipped last week, but this week's the Future the Cosmos Hub calls. Today we kind of talking about the Interchain Foundation, what it is, what its role is, how it sees the Cosmos Hub, and and the future plans to that the ICF has for the hub. Today I'm joined by Billy and Ethan Buckman. So welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I guess I think most people know, but just in case they don't, could you guys kind of give a brief intro about yourselves and what you guys do at the foundation?
Sure. Ethan, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Ethan Buckman. I'm a co-founder of the project. I've served as vice president of the foundation since its inception in late 2016, early 2017. Since then, I was also sort of CTO at All in Bits for a few years shortly before Cosmos Hub launch, moving to the foundation more officially as an employee and trying to sort of build up some capacity there, build out the grants program, build up a bit of a research team. A lot of that team spun out in January of this year into an independent, cooperatively run entity that's Informal Systems, where I'm now CEO, but I'm still vice president at the foundation and pretty actively involved in its activity and working with Billy and Sam, who are sort of running the grant program now.
Yeah, and I'm Billy Renikamp, just updated my name here. I actually work at both the ICF and Interchain GmbH, which is a fully owned subsidiary of the ICF. I have been working as a developer in the space for a few years, mostly around Ethereum, building dApps and doing a lot of Ethereum hackathons, ultimately building a game called Clover's Network, working with Cosmos and Tendermint, beginning to do front-end development. I was working on the very first version of Looney. Eventually started doing developer relations work, and this year have been doing this sort of straddling role between IG and ICF to be in charge of the grants and funding program and or to support the grants and funding program and to also do some DevRel when I have time.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for that. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions. I think the first question would be, what is the Interchain Foundation? Because I think that's a question that a lot of people don't even know. It's like there is the ICF, there's Tendermint, and now there's Informal, there's IG, there's all of these other entities that are within the larger Cosmos ecosystem. So yeah, what is the Interchain Foundation?
So all these entities in the Cosmos ecosystem are this like multi-headed hydra, and the Interchain Foundation is like Poseidon. It's like the ocean that this hydra emerges out of. No, maybe that's a bad analogy, but I guess historically, the Interchain Foundation was the nonprofit we set up to organize, to raise the funds to fund development for the Cosmos Network initially. So All in Bits or Tendermint Inc., as it's more well known, is a U.S. company that's been around since 2014 that Jay set up when he started working on Tendermint, the protocol and the software, and that I joined it early in 2015 when we were early in the blockchain space trying to build stuff. And when we realized we wanted to go and build a public cryptocurrency system, we set up the ICF as a nonprofit to sort of to raise funds and to fund development in sort of a nonprofit manner without focusing on benefiting any particular shareholders, and just sort of bound by Swiss law to pursue its mission, which is the promotion of and research and development of open decentralized networks with a focus specifically on Cosmos. And so the ICF raised money back in 2016 and 2017 and used that money largely for the development of the Cosmos Network software and to fund the launch of Gaia, the Cosmos Hub, and a number of other projects that we all know and love today, and continues to operate mostly in the role of allocating capital into the ecosystem and helping funding ongoing research and development and promotion of everything.
There's not like an official distinction, but I often think of like, say, Tendermint and ICF, while both, receiving allocations of the distribution of atoms at the beginning. They both have vested interest in the sort of success of atoms and the stability of their sort of financial realities based on atoms. But that ICF is especially sort of focused on at a larger scale of like the internet of blockchains. Like the Cosmos Hub is a very sort of like core and essential sort of piece of the projected architecture that sort of makes sense to support this vision of the internet of blockchains. But IBC is really sort of especially core to the success of this larger space. And I mean, not that there's an official distinction of priorities between like, say, the hub and IBC at large, but I like to think that the ICF is especially concerned about the success of the larger internet of blockchains. The hub being a priority within that, but you could imagine a future where the hub is sort of like running, sustaining, and we're sort of continuing to like make sure that this larger growing network is really sort of functioning and working all together.
Gotcha. Yeah, and thanks for that. And obviously, it's pretty obvious that pre-launch of the Cosmos Hub and after it, I'm sure a lot of the I don't know if priority is the right word, but maybe the goal and the short-term kind of vision that the ICF has may have changed a little bit. Could you kind of go into that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, at some level, we're still trying to execute on the core idea, which is a complete Cosmos Hub, which we're not quite at yet. Hopefully, we'll be post Stargate once IBC is delivered. And certainly, a lot of what the ICF has been focused on funding, both before and after, is the robustness of the core software, is the developer experience of that software, and the sort of protocol design, making sure things like IBC, that could have been in the white paper. It was sketched as like kind of a simple protocol focused initially on token transfer, but maybe generalizable later. But in order to cover a lot more use cases, the IBC really doubled down on the protocol design. Sorry, the ICF doubled down on protocol design for IBC. We spent a lot of time across a group of entities really focusing on that, making sure that IBC is a very general purpose protocol that will be sort of future proof and support a lot of different use cases into the future, and be implemented in multiple languages and have support for many development environments and so on. So a lot of the ICF's focus over the last few years until now has really been sort of expanding the set of environments that the Cosmos software can kind of operate in, and making it sort of more accessible to different kinds of users, different platforms, different languages, and so on, really to get to where we're almost at, which is the Stargate launch with IBC running, with soon the ability for all these zones to connect up, which was really the sort of first stage of the vision of the internet of blockchains. And we could talk a little bit about what's next after that. There's still, of course, many things to do, many zones to be built, lots of technology to be explored, and the ICF hopes to continue to play a role in supporting a lot of different directions.
In terms of like changing priorities, I mean, I wasn't part of the ICF before February or March of this year, but if you look at sort of like the recipients of a lot of the funding, say around 2018, it was really stuff that directly was going into like the Cosmos SDK and IBC, for the hub's sort of like launch and success. And because there's been all of these sort of other projects who've benefited from the technology that we've been creating, we've seen all these other sort of things rising in parallel, which also have really interesting features that can go back into the hub, stuff like cross-chain validation potentially. There's research being done on the smart contracting platforms that may or may not be beneficial to the hub. It's like another sort of topic. But just that there's more things being developed by more entities, there's a lot more potential recipients of ICF support than there were in 2018, for example. Some of them, there's sort of continuity between them. I don't remember exactly when we started working with, say, Iris or Agoric, been around for a while, but there's just definitely a lot more moving pieces, projects, technology, which directly benefit the Cosmos Hub, but also indirectly benefit the Cosmos Hub. And I think, where there was just only options for directly benefiting the Cosmos Hub early on, we have a lot more compounding paths to bring that around. Yeah,
and I think that's something that is also interesting because it's the Interchain Foundation where the success of the network is seen as a crucial mission for the foundation itself. And maybe this could be a little bit different from how a lot of the other blockchain foundations are set up, where there's only a single network that they support. So I felt like that's something that people would have some questions on. I guess what have you guys been up to recently in terms of funding, things that you guys have been interested in, and there's been a lot of changes this year also. So could you guys kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change, the first change that happened was Informal basically spun out, right? We talk about sequence of events. Is that right, Ethan?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, going back to the history and talking about funding, like in 2017, 2018, most of the funding from the ICF was focused on, getting the Cosmos Hub out. So, and the primary developer was Tendermint Inc. So there were, really small number of entities receiving funds and working on things. We did, the ICF did fund a sizable amount of research and development in those early days. We were one of the, the initial founders of the Stanford Blockchain Institute, and set up collaborations with a few other research labs in California and in Switzerland. And then in 2019, when a few of us moved from Tendermint to the ICF to work full time to really build out that grant program, that's where we started a lot more of these relationships with Agoric, with Regen, with a number of other of entities that have really become core to sort of the Cosmos development story now. And then as we built up the research team there at the ICF a little bit, focusing on formal verification and the security of the software we're building and the protocols we're rolling out, we felt that we were also thinking a lot about organizational structure, and a number of us were quite enamored with the idea of cooperatives and sort of a cooperatively owned and operated entity, and wanted to figure out a way that we could do that sort of in concert with the ICF. And so ultimately came up with the idea of Informal, which got spun out of the ICF as a independent entity, but cooperatively owned by the employees who were previously employees of the ICF and now employees of Informal. And so the ICF still has some stake in that entity, even though it doesn't control it because it's controlled by its employees, but Informal is still working very closely on ICF roadmap and on protocol design and research related to Cosmos, cross-chain validation, IBC, and so on. And we're still helping administer parts of the grant program and follow up with a number of other vendors in the ecosystem.
Yeah, when Informal was created, it left kind of a hole in the ICF to operate the funding program, and that timed really well with the creation of the Interchange GmbH, which is why we have a service agreement to help administer that grants program, with me as sort of that bridge between the foundation officially and the Interchain GmbH, where I work with Sam to sort of do the bulk of that sort of administration. We still work with Informal Systems on a lot of the reviewing and processing of them. So the beginning of the year sort of started with jumping in there and trying to kickstart the grants program back up. It had been on pause basically since Q4 2019. So there's a bit of a backlog from things that had come in through various channels, and just trying to get like a Q1 sort of moving. And then we sort of finished a process that was originally proposed by Informal to sort of streamline the grants program. Published about that in, I guess, March or April, where we sort of finalized that. That included the creation of a new board, technical advisory board. So this is a group of 7 community members who have different areas of expertise related to engineering, business development, and community across the Cosmos ecosystem. And they are now part of the grants program process. So grants come in, they get reviewed by the grant entities, which are Interchange GmbH and Informal. We come up with a list of recommendations that go to the Board of Management. Board of Management is myself and Michael Niederer, and we compile those into a group of recommendations that then go to the Technical Advisory Board. They review them and add comments, and then the recommendations plus those comments go to the Foundation Council, where they eventually vote on approving them or not. So this extra level has already sort of increased the integrity of the process, I think, a lot, and the quality. It's like because these are all sort of like, public facing and external people, like I want to be proud of all the things that I bring to them and like be able to, you know, say genuinely, like, I'm really excited about this happening. Like this needs to happen for this reason or that reason. And so it's like, it's almost like a preview for when I am part of that process to next bring into Foundation Council and being like, this is why I'm excited about it. And like, see, these people have this to say about it, blah, 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 blah. So that's been a really fun process. And another sort of interesting part of that happened really quickly afterwards is that we expanded the Foundation Council. So that's been amazing because there's 2 more members who are really active, you know, engaged in the process of all of these sort of funding programs and proposals, which is Fernando Perdone, a distributed systems professor, and Brian Crane from Chorus One and Epicenter podcast. And so it's been fun to sort of like join in at the same time as them. You know, we have this sort of like renewed interest. Everybody's new and like really excited about getting things moving. And so we've really sort of seen a big uptick, I think, in the productivity of the foundation this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some of the projects that you guys funded this year, and what has been the focus of the funding? You would say, like the overarching high level.
Well, it's hard to say. It's not like the funding program had a thesis to begin the year. You know, we sort of began in the middle of Q2 or something like that, based on the sort of momentum that carried over from the end of last year and sort of Informal, who was doing this transition, obviously. So I wouldn't say that we had like a really sort of coherent message or strategy on exactly what it's funded. A lot of it was reactive, and a big push this year has been to be a lot more proactive in exactly what we're doing. So we spent a lot of time this year coming up with areas of priorities and you know, things that we want to make sure get addressed. And it's been really fun to sort of shift into that mode and feel a little bit more actionable. Some of the things that I've been especially excited about, you know, identifying solutions for are around user experience and client stuff lately. Last quarter, for me, it was really exciting to identify how to proceed around non-fungible tokens. So I had worked on the non-fungible token module back at Tendermint about a year ago, and had worked a lot on non-fungible tokens in the Ethereum space. And a few projects had come about, and we're doing some stuff with non-fungible tokens, but there wasn't really a sort of coherent, coordinated push to sort of develop that. And so it felt really great that from the position of ICF, we could sort of identify that as an issue that needed to get champions and figure out like what exactly needs to get delivered in this to make it like a coherent developer story to attract new projects. If a project does show up and they want to do something with NFTs, that they have like a toolkit that makes sense and they can use. And so sort of came up with like an NFT wish list and started sending it around to a couple different projects who'd been interested in NFTs in different places in different ways, and identified Persistence One and IXO as the 2 sort of best positioned to sort of execute on what I could imagine was really needed to push that. And so got service agreements in place to begin that. And they've been running the NFT working group now for almost 2 months and been really excited about the progress they've made. Ethan, are there any specific projects or grants this year that you were excited to get funding and excited about the results?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about what's happening with the virtual machines. So, you know, that's Cosmwasm, that's Ethermint, that's Agoric. All of these seem to be maturing quite significantly this year and bringing a lot of new functionality and capability to the Cosmos ecosystem that has sort of long been lacking in some regard by design. But, you know, seeing that come to fruition, I think is really exciting. Let's see what else. There's a few, I think, in the works that haven't been announced yet, so I don't want to front.
We have the Q3 and Q2 were published. I'm just trying to find my list from the Q1 as well.
Very good. Yeah.
I think Q1 was really just the core entities plus actually Chainapsis.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, you know, we were able to kind of work on some of the IBC Interchain account stuff, so it's been a lot of fun so far. Yeah, I guess moving forward into 2021, I think, you know, a lot of the changes have happened. Stargate will be launched soon. What do you guys have in mind for 2021? And yeah, how do you see that playing out?
We've been working on a plan for this and trying to sort of outline, you know, the various many verticals that lie ahead for Cosmos in terms of the technology and applications, and we sort of come up with a primary set of directions that we're hoping to sort of be a little bit more proactive about, like Billy was saying, and lay out, okay, these are directions that are important and there's a number of contenders for, and these are things we want to support. Some of them is stuff we've already given some support to, like virtual machines, for instance. But virtual machines will continue, I think, probably to always be top of mind. Like building smart contracts is not a solved problem by any means. We still don't know what the right abstractions are, what the right environment looks like, what the right tooling is. There's still a lot to go there. And while things like CosmWasm and Agoric are definitely sort of state of the art, especially Agoric with their sort of OCAT model that's been in the works in some regard for decades. There's still a lot to be seen on the virtual machine front. So that's one. A few other directions, sort of more on the infrastructure side, are privacy, anonymity, and cryptography. So there's a lot of advances in cryptography happening all around us, and Cosmos has sort of been purposely conservative in this regard, in sort of sticking with the base, just like SecP and 2519 signatures, really like the things that are assumed quite trusted across the world, and we haven't really doubled down on any of the more adventurous cryptographic stuff. Though we have invested heavily in sort of the research with the Stanford lab and so on, but now that we're starting to see a lot of these things start to mature and the engineering is coming to fruition for a lot of them, we're hoping to see more of that come to Cosmos. So that means more support for privacy preserving solutions in the Cosmos SDK. That means more support for ZK rollups and zero knowledge kinds of proofs and circuitry. That means things like potentially BLS signatures, both at the account level and also potentially at the validator level. So a lot of the advances in cryptography that have happening over the years, now seems to be the time to start to look at benefiting from those and figuring out where it makes sense to integrate them, either into the core where they can end up on the hub or into the zones. And it was even proposed in the white paper that zones would be a great place to experiment with new kinds of cryptographic primitives where you can sort of like isolate them. And this is one of the key aspects of the Cosmos design, is that you can isolate each component system, right? So you can do a lot of experimentation on a particular zone, and you can sort of bound the risk and not have these like cascading contamination of the different components in the topology. But people still need to exercise some amount of discipline to maintain that. But we hope to see a lot of new kinds of cryptographic primitives explored on zones. That's another vertical. Another one is scalability. So, again, Cosmos has always been very conservative on the scalability front. It was like, look, there's a lot of interesting things we could do with sharding and other kinds of layer 2 solutions, and now, rollups and so on. Cosmos was very much, let's get a baseline interoperability protocol in place that's very general purpose, and then let's see what can be built on top of that. And so with IBC, we have that in place now, and now we're looking forward to people building sharding solutions on IBC, to people building other kinds of scalability solutions, optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, and seeing how those things can be connected with the rest of sort of the IBC world to bring more scalability to Cosmos Zones and to the network as a whole. And then, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Well, and then a fourth, so we've kind of split this. We have like 4 verticals of infrastructure, and then a few verticals of more sort of on the application front. So on the infrastructure front, we're thinking, virtual machines, privacy, scalabilities, all the ones I just talked about. And then the next most important one is bridges. So, bridges to Bitcoin, bridges to Ethereum, to Zcash, to all the other new layer 1 solutions, Polkadot and Solana and Near and Celo, and so on. We can enumerate them all. So, there's a lot of bridges to be built, and we hope that, for instance, the Cosmos Hub can come to be a sort of cornerstone hub within the larger ecosystem of not just Cosmos blockchains, but all the world's blockchains in some regard. And so, a lot of bridges will need to be built to do that. And not all of them will bridge directly to the hub. Surely there'll be, some of them will have intermediary peg zones that will sort of help mediate these bridges and these interactions. But there's still definitely a lot of development, a lot of core infrastructure to be built there. So on the infrastructure side, those are sort of the 4 key verticals we're looking at probably putting out some form of request for proposal around. Yeah.
Should I go to the application ones?
Sure.
So at a high level, well, the first one in the broadest is actually just growth. So anything that can lead to sort of user adoption or growth, which means actually things related to user experience, making development kits easier to access, easier to use, better to use, able to use in new environments, things like that. And also sort of points to what I hope to do a lot more of in the grants program next year, which is identifying early minimum viable products. So sort of reversing the general flow that you would see around hackathons, where you basically get a bunch of people working on building something, and then one or two of them gets a prize at the end. But those prizes are generally like sub 5,000 euros or something like that. But it's thought of as like a weekend or a week's worth of work. And if you can sort of like pre-vet a team, which is shown that they're able to build an MVP or some way, then you can sort of scope out or scale interesting or more rapid, fun iterations on sort of small products that can remove some of the risk on those developers and give a chance to try out more experimentation. And that really points to the possibility of like, oh, it turns out there is a really exciting project, product, tool, game that's possible that can lead to a lot more adoption, or maybe like highlights interesting ways to use blockchains that we hadn't considered that could result in more other applications. And ultimately all of those sort of leads to the idea that there's an increase in transactions being generated, which is sort of a primary part of what potentially builds security into the Cosmos Hub. And in a more sort of specific area, we talk about making priorities around social good projects. So this year we've been able to support IXO and Hong Kong initiative on social currencies and time banks. We hope to see a lot more of that, as well as Region Network, for instance, and local currencies, which that Hong Kong initiative project is an example of. They're working with, what is it called, CIS? Ethan?
I don't remember exactly.
The one.
Oh, CID.
CID. Yeah. Community initiated.
Community inclusion currencies.
Community inclusion currencies, CIC. And so we're excited to work with them and see potential follow-up work or other project working in that area. And the last one is crypto farms, which is not an official included category, but it's sort of been a joke, I think, amongst the ICF for a long time. I think it's a dream of many engineers, and especially in the crypto space, of like sustainability and independent growth of land and things like that. I think everybody who works with technology has fantasies of destroying their computers and going to a farm. So this is why it's sort of a joke, but there is some really kind of interesting realities that can be attached to what it would look like if we were to invest in or support development of sustainable land. Even just the idea that maybe the ICF needs to have an investment strategy that includes assets like land.
Yeah.
Again, these are not official plans by the ICF. These haven't been voted or condoned by the Foundation Council, but they're definitely topics that we discuss a lot.
Mm-hmm. I guess how does the foundation measure success? Because I think for application it might be a little bit easier because it's like how many users are using it. But for things like virtual machines, infrastructure, bridges, I think the measure of success could be a little bit different. I'm kind of curious, how have you guys seen it before? Has it changed, and how do you guys see it kind of moving forward in terms of that?
I mean, it comes into play a lot when we're trying to justify what we should be funding, right? Is this going to be successful or not? And I think it's hard to be really quantifiable about success, especially at such an early stage. But one of the metrics I like to think about, or at least, when considering, say, a code base or something like that, is who's the intended user? There's a lot of people who are excited about just geeking out on technology, building something cool because it could be built. It could be useful to somebody in the future, maybe. And I think that's absolutely valuable. You can think of this as sort of like theoretical work compared to like practical work or something. But when it comes to like a code base, these are all like kind of living, breathing things that need to be maintained and used. And so we especially like to find projects who need to use some common infrastructure for themselves. And we know that other people would use it if it existed. And so if there are, like, say, 3 projects who would be interested or willing to build some code, the one who has like its own sort of potential product, who would be a user of it, who has vested interest in seeing that code continue to be maintained, and will want to add features to that code because they want it themselves. You know, they're not just going to wait until they get another service agreement to go back and add things to it. They're not just only doing work on it because we explicitly paid them to do it. You know, that's success for me, that the code is getting used by somebody because it has a potential future in its actual use.
Yeah, I mean, this defining success, and you know, especially in quantitative terms, has been a struggle for sure, especially in, you know, when you're building broad scale infrastructure and it's not, you don't have, you know, real telemetry necessarily, so you don't know who's using it or, you know, how many. I mean, you can go out and look at CoinMarketCap and try to count how many of the public blockchains are built using the Cosmos stack, and I think on last count it was like 10 of them or something that are over 50 million in market cap, and a few of them are over $1 billion. You know, that's one way we could success. But I think more interesting is looking at, you know, how many coming blockchains there are, and how many people are sort of looking at the market of blockchain technology stacks and looking at Cosmos SDK or the virtual machines we're funding, and choosing to go with those because they're general purpose, because they really cater to their needs. It's hard to get concrete details on each of those. A lot of those are kind of specific to the teams that are actually building them to sort of track their own metrics. But this is something that we're interested in understanding how to improve definitions of success. And if anyone in the community has ideas that, like, hey, you know, the ICF should be looking at this metric, or, you know, this is something that might be a good way to measure success. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting for us beyond just like obvious, you know, like number go up for the price kind of thing. You know, it's not so much something we're following too closely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess as an extension of that, I think it's been interesting kind of seeing the interplay between the foundation and the hub, as, you know, in some way a blockchain, but also a decentralized organization. You know, have you felt like the goals have ever diverged, and you know, and you know, should that happen in the future? Like, what do you kind of see happening? Like the Interchain Foundation has its own vision, obviously, which might not be 100% in alignment with what the delegators of the hub want. And where do you find that balance kind of moving forward?
I mean, I think that they're still pretty aligned, but I would actually love to see a world in which they were really different, because it would really sort of prove that this blockchain isn't, you know, just like our blockchain. It really is, you know, a decentralized public network, and it has been from the beginning, which is, I think, a really sort of huge achievement. I mean, I believe we're probably pretty aligned in the goals between the foundation and, let's say, the network at large. But there's also sort of features of the way the foundation can operate and features of the way the hub can operate, which are different and you know, are being basically utilized at this point. You know, the foundation is extremely conservative in the sort of way it operates, and for that reason, you know, we take a lot of time to consider whether or not something would put us at risk. And the hub is not, you know, a legal entity. Nobody can like sue the hub if they do something illegal in any capacity. So that's like kind of a cool superpower the hub has that the ICF doesn't have.
Yeah, the ICF's mandate is definitely broader than the hub, and at some level, I mean, like Billy's saying, that everything is still very highly aligned between the two. The ICF still holds a significant amount of atoms, obviously, but the ICF is also funding many other projects and the development, you know, and technology and infrastructure that is being incorporated into other zones. And it's possible those zones will come to compete with the hub. And this was, you know, explicitly articulated in the Cosmos white paper and has been like fundamental to the design and the values of this community, that it's not about like a one size fits all model. It's not about like a monolithic, top-down inscribed network with a particular topology. It was, look, this is a big experiment. We're going to develop very general purpose, useful tech. We're going to start with, here's one blockchain we think ought to exist and can potentially play a really important role. And then, we'll keep funding general purpose technology and take it from there. And that's sort of how things have been playing out. And it's been really interesting to see the sort of, the differences in responsibilities that are emerging between what the ICF can do and what it can operationalize, and what the hub can do and what it can operationalize, and what the community around the hub is able to do. And the increasingly, right now things are very tightly aligned, which is good, but over time they'll surely diverge, and it'll be good for them to diverge. And having that, differences of opinion between, different stakeholders in the ecosystem is, so long as we can have healthy dialogue, it's actually net healthy and beneficial, and forces everyone to sort of remain, competitive but cooperative, and to keep innovating. So I think there's a lot of excitement ahead as the sort of scope of Cosmos continues to grow, and the ICF continues to fund a wide diversity of general purpose infrastructure that different people can incorporate into new blockchains that will give the hub a run for its money in some regard, but will also probably benefit significantly from the hub's potentially privileged position as like a primary interconnector within the larger ecosystem. So,
I mean, the hub itself is also, let's say the mandate of the foundation is like relatively broad, even though we're very much, focused on the specifically the success of the Cosmos network, which again, you can kind of like be really specific and say the Cosmos network is the Cosmos hub, or you can be very sort of philosophical and say, actually the Cosmos network is every blockchain and the internet, or something like that. Yeah. But the Cosmos hub itself is also in many ways extremely flexible. It has a governance system to upgrade itself and change how it can or want or needs to. So like it makes me think of like the hackathon project Osmosis. They're like creating this new sort of basket with a liquidity provider token as a staking token. Like, what if, even the hub decides that it's too maximalist to only use the atom, and they start doing, like a basket of different assets and have its own sort of new staking system. So it's not just staking with, there's the sky's the limit for the possibility space for that, and what sort of collaborations between networks or infrastructure makes sense in the future. So yeah, sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that also leaves a lot for like people in the Cosmos hub community specifically, because it's like, after all, it is up to that community to find product market fit. Obviously, there will be a lot of the tooling that's needed to get there, funded by the ICF, but yeah, ultimately it is up to the atom holders who decide, what that direction is and how to get there ultimately. Yeah, and I guess could we talk a little bit on the pool itself? I guess the community pool within the Cosmos hub, and does the ICF have any interesting ideas on how to utilize that, or should it even do that?
I'm really excited about the potential for utilizing the community pool in burner chains for governance experimentation. So this is an idea that's come up a couple times. Most recently, I've been discussing it with SimplyDC, who seems really excited about the concept. It could take place in a lot of different ways by a lot of different entities, but the general concept would be, it's good for the Cosmos hub to be conservative. There's sort of a lot resting on it in a lot of ways. It's like safety over liveness, whatever. Hub minimalism is a sort of general perspective on how to think about the hub, but it's also good to like sort of get new features that have capabilities that we need. So rather than saying, okay, there's all these ways that the governance module could be or should be used in a more effective way, let's say lowering the barrier of entry, decreasing the iteration time, maybe making it a lot more parameters and ways to change it. You could say, let's build all those capabilities into the hub, into the governance module, and then make a network upgrade so that the hub just immediately has them. Or you could say, why don't we create a new zone that has those features and then move some small portion of the community fund into that zone via IBC and try it out, maybe that feature wasn't necessary. Maybe this one actually should be modified a couple more times to be like this, and we can try different rounds of funding to do these things. It can be like real dog fooding. And then once those sort of lessons are learned from that, temporary low security burner chain blockchain, then you have a lot more justification for putting them on the hub itself, which I'm really excited to sort of see it becomes a sort of circular funding system with the community pool itself.
Yeah, I think this is a great model for potential hub upgrades, is to start experimenting with them on zones and sort of prove them out with small amounts of capital and go over time, and eventually if it's worthy and it's prove itself, then it could be that functionality could be migrated onto the hub, and that's potentially a responsible way to be experimenting with new features and before they become part of the hub itself. And the hub has sort of always been pitched as following this sort of minimalist doctrine and primarily serving as like an interoperator, and I mean that's what a hub is. You can look at in the world for other examples of hubs, but you think about airports, like an airport hub is just for people to for planes to land, planes to take off, and have many routes from. But airports have shops, they have restaurants, they have other things that go on there that aren't particular to the functionality of moving people from A to B, but end up being valuable and important for the experience of using the airport, right? And so we sort of need to think about hub minimalism in a similar way, like yes, minimalism, but also practicalism, right? So there's sort of maybe a practical hub minimalist middle ground, where we don't want to just like no one's going to ever build a roller coaster into an airport. As far as I know, no one's tried to do that. So we don't want everything in the hub, but there are things that may make sense there beyond the sort of minimalist doctrine, from the perspective of sort of practical needs of the actual people passing through. So it's sort of one way to think about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Although I wouldn't be surprised if someday in the future some Asian airport or like some Middle Eastern airport, roller coaster inside an airport.
Yeah, and then all the traffic gets diverted there because the kids the breaks and everyone gets injured and sues the airport. So that's the kind of thing we want to avoid.
Yeah.
I really like what you said, Ethan, about potentially using that burner chain model for hub upgrades, because it brings up this like aha moment I had a while ago with IBC, is that there's really no such thing as a test network anymore after IBC is live. Yeah. Because if a test network is connected to the hub, you could technically have real money on it. So like, why is it a test network anymore? You just have various scales of security afterwards. Yeah. It also brings up my like nefarious scheme to build a bridge between Rinkeby and mainnet Ethereum and start moving DAI over to Rinkeby and just have unlimited free gas for all of your users forever.
Yeah. I think Ethereum at the moment is a little bit sensitive about testing in prod, given what happened yesterday. But yeah, so this is true, right? Like as soon as once you have IBC, you can easily put up a testnet and connect over IBC to mainnet chains, right? And then who's to say what's test and main anymore? I mean, it's about the contract on that particular, like the social contract on that particular zone, whether it's going to throw away its state and restart. So be very wary if you're going to send tokens to it, but surely the tokens that originate there could be sent around onto the hub and moved elsewhere and sent back, or, become unfettered, free floating things. So it'll be very interesting to see all that.
This is a really cool way that you get token issuance out of the box with IBC. I spin up a single validator chain and I distribute 100,000 Billy tokens. I move all of them over IBC to the Cosmos hub, and then I store my chain.
Yeah. You don't even need to set up a chain. I mean, you can do this with the Solo Machine client that's been built into IBC, right? So the IBC protocol has a lot of unexplored functionality and possibilities, and it's really exciting what's incoming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's also pretty fun because I also thought about this. It's like in the one chain ecosystem type of world, like let's take Ethereum, for example. Like, what is Ethereum? Is it like the Solidity code? Is it the EVM, or is it the ETH token? I think in a one chain system, obviously it seems it's a lot more uniform. But when there's going to be a multi-chain environment, it's like in Cosmos we already have multiple languages supported, multiple chains. So like what is going to be the Cosmos itself, or maybe even the Cosmos Hub itself specifically, could kind of blur as we move into the future. And yeah, I guess another question that I would like to explore was, obviously, the foundation itself, it's not a like a profit-seeking entity, and this is kind of a very long-term, maybe even 10 years plus down the road. I mean, do you guys ultimately see the foundation kind of dissolving once it has served its purpose? Obviously, you guys there is a significant amount of financial assets, but it's not like you guys are making any money. Although it seems like there's been some push into strategic investments as well. But I think that's more, put together with the coherent vision more so than, trying to make money out of it. And yeah. What is it, what's in for the foundation, like 10, 20 years down the road? Like, where do you guys see that?
It's a very good. Go ahead, Billy, if you want to start.
I was just gonna say, we just got off of we have biweekly Foundation Council informal meetings, and informal as in not formal, not the company informal. And this was exactly what we spent like 30 minutes talking about. Like, we don't have like a conclusion. There's not like an official decision that the ICF intends on living for 1,000 years, or that it intends on spending all the money within the next 3 years or anything like that. But it's a really good question. And I think there's a great argument to be made for any of the variations on those sort of two poles. Ethan, are you prepared to say that you have a preference for one or the other?
I don't really have a preference for the ICF going down in 3 years, but I don't expect to live 1,000 years, so I don't know. I have preferences for what happens after you die. So yeah, somewhere in between 3 and 1,000 years sounds pretty good to me. There's a lot of potential for the ICF. It's got a decent amount of capital and a lot of good people, and a interesting role within the ecosystem. For the foreseeable few years, it will continue playing this role of deploying capital and supporting growth and experiments and new technology and research within Cosmos and beyond. And there's a question of what do we want it to look like in the long term? What kind of sustainability do we want to build in? And do we look at sustainability from a financial perspective and try to drive more fundraising or revenue somehow? Or is there an opportunity to look at it from an ecological perspective and invest in land and in building, sustainable agriculture and sustainable energy sources, and figure out what it means to have a genuinely sustainable research and development team, coupled to like ecological constraints rather than just like abstract financial constraints. And this is something we talk about and think about, and new models for R&D. But if you look around the world at other examples of large R&D nonprofits, like there's not that much to look up to. It's sort of, one of the tragedies of our time is that there's not that much success to be had in these nonprofits. And, if you look at for instance, what just happened with Mozilla Foundation, right? They just fired like a quarter of their staff. And that was like key core R&D staff working on like Rust and Servo and all this like exciting stuff. And then, they dropped them. For whatever reason, they're losing the browser wars and so on. So, it's challenging to figure out what success looks like. I mean, one of the best examples I know of for like a quasi nonprofit sort of entity is maybe something like DARPA, which has been, it's an arm of the U.S. government, sure, but it's been behind like a tremendous amount of innovation over the last few decades, and it's worth sort of trying to understand, compared to many government agencies, which are, inept in many respects and bogged down in bureaucracy, somehow, DARPA delivers, even if it's not necessarily on things that, we think are going to be good for mankind, like they're building some kind of robots that's going to wipe everyone out, okay, we can talk about the morality of what some of what they might be going after, but there's something about that kind of organization. And, from what I know about them, it's a very small organization. They hire primarily like program managers that are appointed for a short term to pursue some kind of moonshot, right? And that's maybe an interesting model for something like the ICF or for crypto foundations more broadly. Like, okay, you focus on this kind of you're in an incentive environment similar to what you have at DARPA. There seem to be a lot of problems with trying to build really long-term R&D nonprofits, and you get bogged down in like mismatched incentives. And like if you look at Mozilla, like so much of the cash is just going to executive compensation. It's like obscene, right? You look at the market share of Firefox is plummeting, and the compensation to the executives is skyrocketing. It's kind of disgusting, right? And maybe that's from this expectation that you'll be an executive there for a very long time, and you just want to secure that salary, for 30 years or whatever, something like that. Whereas, if you fix people's terms and you say, okay, you're going to be employed here, but it's 3 years max. What can you do in 3 years? And that's sort of the motto of the organization. Then, maybe that's part of the secret to DARPA's success. I mean, I don't know if I fully understand how DARPA works. For some reason, this is the motto I have in my head, but we've sort of been toying with this as a potential way for the ICF or a model for other crypto foundations to deal with some of the challenges that nonprofit R&D entities have had with incentive alignment and with long-term sustainability and continuous innovation. So I don't think this is a solved problem or anyone really knows concretely what to do. There's certainly a lot of things in front of us in the short term and a lot of excitement about the Cosmos ecosystem that we're focused on, but we are having these conversations and certainly open to input if other folks in the wider community have any feedback or examples of successful R&D nonprofits or alternative kinds of organizations. That's all stuff we're super interested in.
Yeah, that's actually really cool because I think I do see myself getting really zoned into this blockchain space a lot, where it's like feels like the product itself becomes the goal, whereas when you step back a little bit, like the product should be a tool for for a bigger vision, and blockchain itself could be that tool for something greater than the product itself, right? So yeah, it's a pretty interesting thought that I guess I haven't really thought about so much recently. Yeah, I think we have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything else you guys would like to mention before we close this out? Word to the community, something else you guys have been thinking about?
I think we covered a lot of good ground. We're still doing lots of writing. Billy's been pushing out these ICF updates every few weeks, so keep watching those, and yeah.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you guys a lot. And thank you all, listeners and viewers, for joining. And yeah, that'll be it for this week. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.